When flight attendant Rachel Monroe pushed Danielle Vaughn off Sky Air Flight 401, she thought she was removing just another passenger who didn't belong in first class. She couldn't have been more wrong. Behind Danielle's calm exterior and perfectly tailored suit was the brilliant CEO of Nova Technologies, a woman who'd built an empire by turning obstacles into opportunities. As Danielle stood in the terminal, her dignity intact despite the humiliation, she made one call that would set in motion an unstoppable chain of events. Within days, online outrage would explode. Within weeks, congressional hearings would begin. Rachel never realized that in trying to put Danielle in her place, she had actually launched her to her greatest height, as the woman who wouldn't just fight back against one airline, but would transform an entire industry built on bias. The push wasn't the end of Danielle's journey, it was just the beginning. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The digital alarm on Danielle Vaughn's nightstand blinked 4:30 a.m. as her eyes opened moments before it would sound. She always woke before her alarm, a habit formed from years of early mornings and late nights building her empire. Danielle slid out of bed and settled onto the meditation cushion by her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking New York City. 20 minutes of focused breathing centered her for the day ahead. After meditation, she moved to her desk where multiple screens displayed pre-market stock forecasts. Her eyes scanned the numbers with practiced precision. Nova Technologies was up in pre-trading, good news before her investor meeting in San Francisco. Before heading to her shower, she paused at the framed photo of Marion Taylor, her late mentor, and touched it gently. "Another big day, Marion," she whispered. Walking through her penthouse to the kitchen, Danielle passed the wall of achievements she'd accumulated at just 35 years old. Her Harvard MBA diploma, the framed Forbes 30 Under 30 cover, Time's Most Influential People certificate. But it was the handwritten note beside them that caught her eye every morning. "Never let them decide your altitude." Her mother's words, written the day Danielle left for college, were her daily reminder of why she fought so hard. 2 hours later, Danielle's driver pulled up to JFK Airport's departures terminal. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit and carrying only her designer briefcase and a small carry-on, she strode confidently through the terminal toward TSA pre-check. Despite her elite status and frequent flyer profile, the TSA agent directed her to the side. "Random additional screening, ma'am," he said without making eye contact. Danielle took a steady breath. This was the third random screening in her last 5 flights. She complied silently, holding her composure as other business travelers, mostly white men, breezed through the line without interruption. After clearing security, Danielle made her way to the Sky Air first-class lounge. Her flight to San Francisco wasn't for another hour, and she needed to review her presentation one more time. As she approached the reception desk, the attendant smiled warmly. "Good morning. Welcome to Sky Air Elite Lounge. May I see your credentials?" Danielle presented her executive elite card and boarding pass. The attendant's smile faltered for just a moment before recovering. "Right this way, Ms. Vaughn." As Danielle settled into a quiet corner of the lounge, another attendant approached. "Would you like anything to drink? Perhaps a ginger ale or cranberry juice?" Danielle looked up from her tablet. 18-year Macallan, neat, please," the attendant blinked. "I'm sorry, miss. The premium spirits are reserved for our executive elite members and their guests." "I am executive elite," Danielle replied calmly, holding up her card. "Have been for 5 years now." "Oh, my apologies," the attendant stammered. "I just assumed. I thought you might be waiting for. I'll get that Macallan right away." Danielle returned to her documents, barely registering the slight. She'd learned to conserve her energy for battles that mattered. In the staff area of Terminal 4, flight attendant Rachel Monroe applied a fresh coat of lipstick in the bathroom mirror. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a regulation bun, her Sky Air uniform pressed and perfect, but the dark circles under her eyes told another story. "You look like hell," said her co-worker Bethany, applying mascara beside her. "Thanks," Rachel sighed. "Just found out I'm covering Melissa's shift too. Double duty to San Francisco and back." "Custody battle still dragging on?" Rachel's jaw tightened. Mark's lawyer is now saying my inconsistent schedule makes me an unfit primary caregiver, as if his traveling sales job is any better. That's brutal. Bethany sympathized. I need this job and the overtime more than ever, Rachel said, straightening her uniform jacket. So here I am, running on 3 hours of sleep and a prayer. Just don't take it out on the passengers, Bethany joked. Rachel forced a smile. I'm the picture of professionalism always. When boarding began for Sky Air Flight 401 to San Francisco, Danielle was among the first called. As an executive elite member, she had priority boarding even before first class. She walked down the jet bridge, nodding politely to the gate agent. Stepping onto the plane, she greeted the senior flight attendant with a smile that wasn't returned. Danielle found her seat, 1A, her preferred spot, and stowed her small carry-on in the overhead compartment. She settled in, pulled out her tablet, and began reviewing her investor pitch one last time. Other passengers filed past her. A few first-class eighths travelers nodded in greeting. Most didn't. Danielle was used to being the only black person in first class. She kept her focus on her work, occasionally glancing up as the cabin filled. Rachel Monroe entered the cabin from the rear galley, checking the passenger manifest on her tablet. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she walked past row 1. Excuse me, she said, stopping beside Danielle's seat. This section is for executive elite members. Are you sure you're in the right cabin? Danielle looked up, her expression neutral despite the familiar sting of the question. Yes, I'm in the right seat. 1A. She held up her boarding pass. Rachel took the boarding pass, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. This doesn't look like our standard executive elite boarding pass. It was issued at the check-in counter, Danielle explained patiently. Your system was having printing issues, so they used the backup format. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. I'll need to verify this. Could you please come with me to the gate? Is there a problem? Asked the man in 1B, a white businessman in his 60s who had boarded without question. Just a routine verification, Rachel replied without looking at him. Danielle took a slow, centered breath. I've verified my boarding pass twice already at security and at the gate. I'm an executive elite member and this is my assigned seat. Ma'am, I need to make sure everything is in order, Rachel insisted, her voice rising slightly. We can't take off with discrepancies. Danielle stood, intending to show Rachel her executive elite membership card. As she reached for her purse, Rachel stepped forward, physically blocking her path. Ma'am, you need to step out of the way, Rachel said, placing a hand on Danielle's arm and shoving it backward. You're delaying other passengers. The physical contact sent a jolt through Danielle. In all her years of subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination, no one had ever actually put their hands on her. A teenage girl in row 2 had already taken out her phone and begun recording the interaction. Did you just push me? Danielle asked, her voice low and controlled despite the shock. I merely guided you, Rachel responded, now standing uncomfortably close. Now, either verify your ticket at the gate, or I'll need to call security. The cabin had gone quiet. Passengers watched the scene unfold, but no one spoke up. The man in 1B suddenly became very interested in his newspaper. A woman in 3C whispered something to her companion, and they both snickered. Probably just a mix-up, an older man muttered, not meeting Danielle's eyes. Rachel gestured toward the exit. Ma'am, please, you're becoming a security concern. With remarkable composure, Danielle gathered her tablet and purse. The humiliation burned beneath her calm exterior, but she wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. I'll speak with your supervisor, she said quietly. That would be the captain, and he's preparing for takeoff, Rachel replied, with a slight smirk. You'll need to disembark now. Danielle walked down the aisle with dignity, aware of every eye on her. The teenage girl was still recording. As she stepped off the plane and into the jetway, she heard the senior flight attendant ask the gate agent to handle the situation. Standing outside the gate, Danielle took several deep breaths. Her hands were steady as she pulled out her phone and dialed a number from memory. It's Vaughn, she said when the call connected. Activate Protocol Indigo, full escalation, all of it. There was a pause on the other end, then, "Confirmed. Are you certain?" "Never more so," Danielle replied, then ended the call. She walked away, from the gate without looking back, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. Only the slight flare of her nostrils betrayed the fire burning within. Meanwhile, the teenage girl who had recorded the incident was already uploading her video to social media. Her thumbs flew across her phone screen as she typed the caption, "This woman was kicked off first class for being black. Guess who she really is?" She added hashtags, racism, flying while black, joy sky high, and pressed post. The spark had been lit. Within hours, it would become a wildfire. Atlanta, 2000. 10-year-old Danielle Vaughn sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by a dozen calculators and a stack of handwritten code. Her mother, Maya Vaughn, a high school history teacher and weekend civil rights organizer, watched from the doorway with tired but proud eyes. "What are you building now, baby girl?" Maya asked. "Little." Danielle looked up, her eyes bright with excitement. "I programmed these calculators to do more than math. They can pass notes in class without teachers knowing." Maya laughed. "And who's buying these special calculators?" "Everyone," Danielle replied confidently. $20 each. I made $240. This week, Maya's eyebrows rose. $240? What are you going to do with all that money? Danielle's expression turned serious. Save it. One day I'll build something big, something that changes everything. The memory faded as present-day Danielle stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nova's Manhattan headquarters. Below her stretched the city she'd conquered, one board meeting at a time. Nova Technologies had revolutionized environmental monitoring. Through advanced AI systems, and their transportation sector solutions had made Danielle a billionaire before her 35th birthday. "The final IPO documents are ready for your review," said Imani Thompson, Danielle's chief of staff, placing a tablet on the conference table. "Legal says we're on track for the biggest tech offering of the quarter." Danielle nodded without turning from the window. "And the Sky Air situation?" "The video has 3.2 million views and climbing," Imani reported. "Their PR team released a statement calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. They haven't identified you yet." "They will," Danielle replied. "The question is what they'll do when they realize who I am." Who Danielle Vaughn was extended far beyond Nova's CEO. Few people knew about her strategic investments across multiple industries, a silent empire built deliberately and with surgical precision. One of her holding companies, Horizon Ventures, owned significant shares in dozens of transportation technology providers, and through a complex shell corporation, she controlled nearly 8% of TransGlobal Partners, Sky Air's parent company. Danielle had built her influence carefully, operating in the shadows where she could affect change without becoming a target. Until now. "I need you to connect me with Congresswoman Gutierrez," Danielle said, finally turning from the window. "Secure line, no assistance." 20 minutes later, Danielle was speaking with Lina Gutierrez, one of the most powerful Latina voices in Congress, and a longtime friend. "I saw the video, Danny," Lina said without preamble. "That was you, wasn't it?" "It was." "Jesus, are you okay?" "I'm not the one who should be worried," Danielle replied evenly. "I need your help, Lina. It's time to pull the thread on Sky Air's hiring and discrimination practices." "You want an official investigation?" "I want a quiet one, for now. Data first, headlines later." Lina was silent for a moment. "You know this isn't just about one flight attendant, right? You're talking about taking on an entire industry culture." "I'm aware," Danielle said. "That's precisely the point." After ending the call, Danielle sent a text to another number. "Lunch. Tomorrow, the usual place. It's time to discuss the airline game." The following day, Danielle sat across from Malik Ayers at a private table in the back of an unassuming Brooklyn restaurant. At 45, Malik was one of the most successful black hedge fund managers in American history, with a talent for strategic acquisitions that bordered on precognition. "You're going scorched earth on this one, aren't you?" Malik asked, cutting into his steak. "I'm going justice," Danielle corrected. "Scorched earth is what they did to my dignity, and to countless others who didn't have my resources to fight back. Malik nodded thoughtfully. What do you need from me? Capital and silence. We're going to quietly acquire enough leverage to force real change, but it has to happen under the radar. You know they'll fight dirty once they realize what's happening. Danielle's smile was sharp. I'm counting on it. The dirtier they fight, the more evidence we collect. Malik considered her for a long moment, then nodded. I'm in. Send the details to my secure server. That evening, Danielle visited a converted warehouse in Queens. The industrial exterior belied the high-tech security within. She pressed her palm to a hidden scanner, and a heavy door clicked open. Inside, surrounded by multiple screens displaying lines of code, sat Jude Wilson. With his wild red hair and perpetual stubble, he looked more like a grad student than a former black hat hacker who'd served 3 years for exposing corporate security flaws. The famous Danielle Vaughn graces my humble abode, Jude said, spinning in his chair. To what do I owe the honor? I need your skills, Jude, Danielle replied, setting down her bag. It's time to repay that rehabilitation program I funded. Jude's expression turned serious. Is this about that airline video? That was you, wasn't it? Danielle nodded. I need internal emails, training records, incident reports, anything that shows a pattern at Sky Air. That's not exactly legal, Jude pointed out. Neither is discrimination, Danielle countered. Besides, I'm not asking you to hack them. There are whistleblowers who need secure channels to share what they know. You provide the channels, protect their identities. Jude studied her face. This is personal for you. It's personal for anyone who's ever been pushed aside because of how they look, Danielle said quietly. Will you help? Jude cracked his knuckles. For you? Always. Let's make some noise. Back at her office the next day, Danielle reviewed a file marked Project Ascend Rejected. 2 years earlier, Nova had approached Sky Air with an AI-based fuel management system that would have reduced their carbon footprint by 32%, while saving millions in fuel costs. The rejection letter cited untested technology and integration concerns. Yet 6 months later, Sky Air had implemented a remarkably similar system developed by a competitor, with worse safety protocols and higher costs. Danielle had dismissed it as business as usual at the time, but now she noticed something she'd overlooked. The language in the rejection letter was filled with coded phrases questioning the cultural fit of Nova's approach. They didn't reject our technology, she murmured. They rejected me. That evening, Danielle gathered her core team in Nova's secure conference room. Present were Imani Thompson, her loyal chief of staff, Ronell Washington, her razor-sharp general, counsel, and Victor Chen, her brilliant but introverted CTO. I'm initiating Project Phoenix, Danielle announced, activating the room's security protocols. Over the next 30 days, we're going to systematically expose Sky Air's culture of discrimination and corruption, and then transform the entire industry. She outlined the plan in meticulous detail. Gathering evidence, building public pressure, leveraging political connections, and ultimately using their financial power to force structural change. This isn't just about one incident, she concluded. It's about every person who's ever been made to feel small because of who they are. It's about changing the altitude of an entire industry. Her team exchanged glances, then Imani spoke for the group. We're with you, all the way. The first seed was planted the next morning when an anonymous source leaked the video of Danielle being pushed to an aviation watchdog blog, along with compiled statistics showing a disturbing pattern of black professionals being downgraded or removed from flights. The blog post ended with a question. Is this a one-off incident or a symptom of a systemic problem? By sunset, Flying While Black was trending on Twitter. That night, Danielle stood alone on her penthouse balcony, watching the city lights below. She thought of her mother, who had passed away just before Nova's first major breakthrough. Maya Vaughn had fought for equality in classrooms and courtrooms her entire life. Her final words to Danielle had been, "Don't ever let them make you small." Danielle's eyes reflected the city lights as she whispered into the night air, "I won't, Mama." In fact, I'm about to make myself and everyone like me impossible to ignore. The quiet fire in her eyes burned steady and sure. The battle had begun, and Danielle Vaughn never started a fight she didn't intend to win. As morning broke over Sky Air's corporate headquarters, executives huddled in their crisis management room. The video of Danielle Vaughn being pushed off. Their flight had reached 8 million views overnight. Social media was ablaze with outrage, and the hashtag "The Torrent Flying While Black" had been shared by celebrities and politicians alike. News outlets had begun picking up the story, and the company's public relations team was in full damage control mode. Gerald Langston, Sky Air's CEO, scanned the room with cold eyes. At 62, he'd weathered many storms in his 4 decades in the airline industry. This was just another tempest to navigate. "What's our statement?" he demanded. Sarah Palmer, the head of public relations, cleared her throat. "We've prepared a response emphasizing our commitment to customer service and explaining that the incident resulted from a documentation verification issue." And the flight attendant? Rachel Monroe. 10-year veteran. Solid record. "We're positioning her as following protocol in a high-stress situation." Gerald nodded. "Release it immediately. Make sure legal signs off." Within the hour, Sky Air's official statement appeared on their website and social media channels. Sky Air is committed to treating all passengers with dignity and respect. Regarding the incident on Flight 401, our attendant was following standard verification protocols when the passenger became belligerent and was unable to provide sufficient documentation for first-class accommodation. Sky Air has a zero-tolerance policy for disruptive behavior that compromises flight safety. We are reviewing the incident internally and will take appropriate action if necessary. The statement landed like a match on gasoline. "Belligerent?" Danielle said incredulously, reading the statement on her tablet while Imani poured her morning coffee. "They're actually claiming I was belligerent?" "They're desperate," Imani replied, "and they still don't know who you are." Danielle's phone chimed with a text from Jude. "Internet detectives incoming. 3, 2, 1. Almost immediately, her phone began ringing with media requests. Somewhere in the digital universe, someone had connected the dots between the woman. In the viral video and Danielle Vaughn, CEO of Nova Technologies Online, a different kind of investigation was unfolding. Reddit threads and Twitter users began digging into Rachel Monroe's history. Flight review sites and consumer complaint boards revealed 3 prior incidents where passengers of color had reported uncomfortable interactions with her. All 3 complaints had been dismissed without investigation. One user posted, "Found this from 2019. Black doctor in first class asked to show credentials 3 times while white passengers walked right on. Flight attendant's name, Rachel Monroe." Sky Air racism. Another shared, "My cousin, Indian tech exec, was questioned about his upgrade by blonde flight attendant on Sky Air last year. Had to get the captain involved. Same woman." The online sleuthing intensified, and by noon, Rachel Monroe's social media accounts had been discovered, analyzed, and scrutinized for any sign of racial bias. While there was no smoking gun, internet detectives noted that she only followed and interacted with white celebrities and influencers. In her suburban home outside Newark, Rachel Monroe sat on her living room couch, blinds drawn, watching her phone explode with notifications. Her Instagram followers had quintupled overnight, but not in a good way. Her most recent photos were flooded with angry comments. "Is this the racist flight attendant? Does pushing black women make you feel powerful? Sky Air, is this your employee training?" Her hands trembled as she called Sky Air's employee assistance line. "Human resources, this is Kevin." "It's Rachel Monroe," she said, her voice cracking. "I need help. People are saying horrible things online. They're calling my house." "We're aware of the situation, Rachel. The union rep will contact you shortly. Until then, do not speak to anyone. Not media, not other employees, not on social media. Understand? But I need to explain. Do not speak to anyone," Kevin repeated firmly. "We're handling this." Rachel ended the call just as her personal phone rang. It was her lawyer, Frank Taylor. "Rachel, I've reviewed the video," he said without preamble. "We need to be very careful here. Sky Air is already positioning you as the fall girl. What? They told me they're handling it. They're handling their corporate liability, not you, Frank clarified. Their statement specifically mentions the attendant following protocols. They're creating distance. Rachel sank deeper into her couch. What do I do? Stay silent for now. Let me work on this. But Rachel... Frank paused. We need to have an honest conversation about what really happened on that flight. As the internet focused on Rachel, Imani Thompson received an unexpected request for a coffee meeting from a Sky Air executive named James Keller. Curious but cautious, she agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near Central Park. James was all smooth, confidence in his tailored suit, his smile practiced as he extended his hand. Thank you for meeting me, Ms. Thompson. I know you must be extraordinarily busy. Imani matched his professional demeanor. What can I do for Sky Air, Mr. Keller? Please call me James, he insisted, lowering his voice. This meeting isn't exactly official Sky Air business. Imani raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I've been following your career with interest, James continued. Your work with Nova has been remarkable, and your loyalty to Ms. Vaughn is commendable. Thank you, Imani replied cautiously. I'll be direct. Transcontinental Airlines is looking for a chief of operations. The compensation package includes stock options and a base salary of $950,000, plus bonuses. Imani blinked. And you're telling me this because I'd like to recommend you, James said, sliding a business card across the table. The CEO is a personal friend. That's very generous, but I'm happy at Nova. James leaned forward. Imani. May I call you Imani? We both know the situation with Ms. Vaughn and Sky Air is going to get messier before it gets better. This offer provides you a graceful exit before any collateral damage. The implication was crystal clear. Imani kept her expression neutral, as she slipped her phone from her purse and placed it on the table, casually positioning it to capture their conversation. You're offering me a job in exchange for what exactly? James smiled thinly. Your influence. Ms. Vaughn values your opinion. A word from you suggesting this isn't a battle worth fighting could save everyone a lot of trouble. Including Sky Air? Including everyone, James repeated. This is a win-win proposal. Imani stood, gathering her belongings. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Keller, but I'll have to decline. My loyalty isn't for sale, at any price. As James's smile faltered, Imani walked away with the entire conversation recorded. That evening, another bombshell dropped online. An anonymous aviation industry whistleblower leaked a Sky Air executive chat log to several journalists. The document revealed a disturbing internal coding system used to flag certain passengers. Code 3. Black female passenger, Tango Delta. Muslim male passenger, Sierra Lima. Hispanic families. One message from a senior operations manager read, 2 code. 3's upgraded to first today. Keep an eye on cabin dynamics. Another from a customer service director stated, Tango Delta requesting accommodation for prayer. Standard delay tactics advised. The leaked messages ignited fresh outrage, with many pointing out that the coding system itself proved that discrimination was institutional, not just the actions of a single flight attendant. As the scandal expanded, Congresswoman Lena Gutierrez seized the moment. Standing at a podium on Capitol Hill, flanked by other members of the Congressional Black Caucus and Hispanic Caucus, she addressed the press. Recent events have brought to light what many Americans of color have known for decades, that discrimination in our transportation systems is not imagined, but institutional. Today, I am calling for Senate hearings into discriminatory practices in the airline industry, with specific focus on passenger treatment, hiring policies, and corporate accountability. Though she never mentioned Danielle or Sky Air by name, the timing left little doubt about the catalyst for her announcement. Wall Street took notice. By closing bell, Sky Air's stock had dropped 9% as travel influencers and celebrities began publicly boycotting the airline. What none of the financial analysts detected was the pattern of stock purchases happening simultaneously. Small but strategic acquisitions by various investment groups, all quietly connected to Malik Ayers and Danielle Vaughn. Back in her suburban home, Rachel Monroe sat with her 10-year-old daughter Emma at the dinner table. The girl pushed spaghetti around her plate, unusually quiet. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Rachel asked. "You've barely touched your food." Emma looked up, her eyes troubled. "Mom, Kayla at school showed me something on her phone today. She said you're mean to black women. Is that true?" The question hit Rachel like a physical blow. Her mind raced through justifications. She was just doing her job. The passenger hadn't shown proper documentation. She'd been trained to be suspicious of certain behaviors. But looking into her daughter's innocent eyes, those excuses suddenly felt hollow. "It's complicated, honey," she finally managed. "But is it true?" Emma persisted. Rachel felt something crack inside her, a protective shell of denial she'd built around herself for years. I think I made a mistake, Emma. A big one." That night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel sat alone in her kitchen with a glass of wine and her thoughts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sky Air's legal team. "Mandatory meeting tomorrow. Do not admit fault to anyone. Liability concerns." She stared at the message, then at a photo of Emma on the refrigerator. For the first time, she wondered what example she was setting for her daughter and what kind of person she had become. In his Queens warehouse, Jude Wilson worked through the night, sifting through data provided by anonymous Sky Air employees. One file particularly caught his attention, a training video for new flight attendants. The video seemed standard at first, covering safety protocols and customer service techniques. But around the 17-minute mark, a section titled Passenger Profile Awareness began. The narrator explained how to identify passengers of concern using coded language and examples that predominantly featured people of color. Remember, to verify documentation for passengers who appear out of place in premium cabins, the narrator advised over footage of a black man in a first-class seat. Trust your instincts regarding passengers who seem uncomfortable or nervous about the flying experience, the narrator continued, while showing a woman in a hijab. Jude immediately sent the video to Danielle with a message. "Smoking gun. They're literally training them to profile." The following morning, Danielle Vaughn walked through the same Sky Air terminal where she'd been humiliated days earlier. This time, she moved with purpose, dressed in a black designer suit, her expression resolved. Flanking her were Ronell Washington, her general counsel, 2 other attorneys from a prominent civil rights law firm, and 3 reporters from major news outlets. Airport staff did double takes as they recognized her. A few passengers pulled out phones to record. Danielle ignored them all, her focus absolute as she headed toward the airline's administrative offices. The message was clear. This time, she wasn't being pushed out. She was walking in. The headline on the Daily Insider read, "Exclusive, Black. CEO pushed off flight had previously married real estate fraudster." The accompanying article insinuated that Danielle Vaughn's brief marriage to real estate developer Julian Foster 5 years earlier linked her to his subsequent conviction for investor fraud. What the article conveniently omitted was that Danielle herself had been the one to discover the fraud and report it to authorities, ending both the marriage and Foster's criminal enterprise. "They're getting desperate," Malik Ayers observed, setting down the tablet displaying the article. He and Danielle were meeting in a private dining room at his investment firm. "When they go for character assassination, you know you've got them running scared." Danielle nodded, sipping her water. "I expected this. What I didn't expect was the betrayal from within." That morning, she had discovered that Elliot Hart, one of Nova's board members and her former mentor, had been feeding information to Sky Air's legal team. An email accidentally forwarded to her chief technology officer revealed that Hart had shared confidential information about Nova's upcoming projects and Danielle's strategic plans. "I've known Elliot for 15 years, Danielle said quietly. "He was at my Harvard graduation. He helped me secure my first major investors." "What's his connection to Sky Air?" Malik asked. "His investment firm manages their pension fund. They threatened to pull the account if he didn't help them manage the Vaughn situation." Malik shook his head. "Money and fear, the 2 levers that move the world." "Speaking of which, Danielle said. "How are you holding up under the pressure?" Malik laughed humorlessly. "You mean the surprise IRS audit that magically appeared 3 days after I started buying Sky Air shares? Or the sudden interest in my firm's compliance procedures from regulators who couldn't find us on a map last month?" "They're coming after you because of me," Danielle said, regret edging her voice. "They're coming after me because I chose to stand with you," Malik corrected firmly. "There's a difference, and I don't regret it." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "The question is, are you ready to go nuclear? Because they certainly are." Danielle's phone chimed with a news alert. She glanced at the screen, then showed it to Malik. The headline read, "Nova Technologies faces security breach. Customer data potentially compromised." "The attack begins," she said quietly. As Danielle navigated the corporate battlefield, her mind drifted back to a painful childhood memory. She was 12 years old, excited about a weekend field trip to the Museum of Science and Technology in Atlanta. Maya Vaughn had saved for months to pay for Danielle's spot on the trip. The morning of the excursion, Danielle waited eagerly at the designated pickup spot, her backpack filled with snacks and a notebook for observations. When the bus arrived, her teacher, Mrs. Brennan, pulled her aside with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Danielle, but there's been a change in the group assignments." "What do you mean?" young Danielle asked, confusion clouding her excitement. "The museum has a policy," Mrs. Brennan explained awkwardly. "Only one diverse student per tour group, for balance. The other groups already have their slots filled." "You mean only one black kid per group?" Danielle said, her voice small but clear. Mrs. Brennan avoided her eyes. "It's not my rule." "Dear, I'm sorry." Danielle rode home on the city bus, tears streaming silently down her face. When she walked through the door, Maya knew immediately something was wrong. "Baby, what happened? Why aren't you on your field trip?" Through sobs, Danielle explained the one-per-group policy. Maya held her daughter tightly, her own eyes wet with tears of rage and sorrow. "Listen to me, Danielle," Maya said, holding her daughter's face between her hands. "One day you'll build your own bus, your own museum, and you'll make the rules." The memory dissolved as Danielle refocused on the present crisis. She had indeed built her own empire, but the old rules still haunted the structures around her. Now it was time to change those rules forever. Back at Sky Air's headquarters, Rachel Monroe sat nervously in a conference room with her union representative and a company lawyer. The mood was tense as they prepared her for potential legal proceedings. "Just stick to the script," the lawyer advised. "You were following company protocol for verification of premium cabin credentials. The passenger became uncooperative. You acted to maintain cabin order." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "But that's not exactly what happened. She wasn't uncooperative. She showed me her boarding pass." The lawyer's expression hardened. "Rachel, let me be clear. If you deviate from the company's position, Sky Air cannot protect you. This isn't just about one incident anymore. It's a PR nightmare with potential class action implications." "You're asking me to lie," Rachel said quietly. "I'm asking you to be a team player," the lawyer corrected. "This woman is trying to bring down an entire airline, your employer, the source of your paycheck and benefits, over what was essentially a misunderstanding." After the meeting, Rachel sat alone in her car in the parking garage, her hands gripping the steering wheel though the engine remained off. The weight of the situation pressed down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. She thought of Emma, of the mortgage, of her custody battle, all dependent on her keeping this job. She also thought of the woman she'd pushed, Danielle Vaughn, whose dignified response had conveyed more power than any show of anger could have. Rachel had spent days telling herself that she'd done nothing wrong, that she was just following protocol. But the truth had been gnawing at her. She had made assumptions based on appearance, and she had put her hands on another human being. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Imani Thompson's business card, which had been distributed during Sky Air's investigation. Taking a deep breath, she typed a message. "This is Rachel Monroe. I want to talk. Off the record." At Nova headquarters, Jude's data exploration had uncovered something disturbing that went beyond discrimination. While analyzing Sky Air's flight path records, he discovered a pattern of fuel dumping incidents over specific neighborhoods in several cities. Cross-referencing with demographic data, he found that 87% of these incidents occurred above predominantly Black and Hispanic communities. "They're not just pushing people off planes," Jude told Danielle over a secure video call. "They're literally dumping their waste on communities of color. I've got satellite images proving they're jettisoning fuel well before FAA-approved altitudes and locations." "Can you verify this is systematic and not coincidental?" Danielle asked. "Already have," Jude confirmed. Internal emails show they recalculated dumping coordinates after fuel disposal regulations tightened last year. They specifically chose new coordinates to avoid high-visibility areas, which apparently means white suburbs. Danielle's expression darkened. "Add it to the investigation file, and Jude, get me every name in those email chains." That same afternoon, Nova's cybersecurity team detected a sophisticated attack on their core AI systems. The hackers were specifically targeting the environmental monitoring algorithms that had made Nova famous, the same technology Sky Air had rejected before implementing their inferior knockoff. "It's a direct hit on our intellectual property," Victor Chen, Nova's CTO, explained in an emergency meeting. "They're trying to corrupt our baseline data, the foundation of our entire system." "Origin?" Danielle asked. "Multiple sources, but we've traced the primary attacks to servers owned by TechSphere Solutions. Sky Air's main technology contractor, Ronell Washington, the general counsel, noted." Danielle's expression remained calm, but her eyes flashed with determination. "Activate all defense protocols, then prepare our countermeasures." "Countermeasures?" Victor asked cautiously. "Evidence gathering," Danielle clarified. "Every attempt they make to breach our systems creates a forensic trail. Document everything. This isn't just corporate espionage. It's part of a pattern we're building for the investigation." As her team dispersed to handle the crisis, Danielle received a call from Imani. "Rachel Monroe wants to talk," Imani reported. "Off the record." "Do you think it's a trap?" Danielle asked. "My instinct says no. She reached out on her personal phone, not through Sky Air channels. She sounds genuine." Danielle considered her options. "Set up a secure meeting. Just you, me, and her. No lawyers, no recording devices." "Are you sure that's wise?" Imani asked cautiously. "No," Danielle admitted. "But sometimes wisdom isn't as valuable as compassion." That evening, Danielle hosted a private roundtable at her penthouse. Around her table sat 12 men and women of color from various airlines: pilots, attendants, ground crew, and engineers. Some had decades in the industry, others were relative newcomers. All had stories. A Black female pilot described being repeatedly mistaken for cabin crew despite her uniform. A Hispanic mechanic recounted safety concerns ignored until white colleagues raised the same issues. A South Asian flight attendant shared how he was always assigned to handle difficult passengers from similar backgrounds. "I've been flying for 22 years, said William Foster, a senior pilot with a major carrier. "I still get passengers who do a double take when they see me in the cockpit. Some have actually requested a different flight. My evaluations consistently mention that I'm too direct or not warm enough," added Janet Michaels, a Caribbean-American attendant. "My white colleagues with identical customer service approaches are efficient and professional." Danielle listened to each story, taking notes, asking questions, connecting patterns. By the end of the evening, a bigger picture had emerged, one of systematic exclusion, subtle barriers, and constant microaggressions that accumulated into career-limiting obstacles. "What you've shared tonight will help shape the future," Danielle promised as the gathering concluded. "This isn't just about one incident or one airline. It's about changing the entire industry." After everyone had left, Danielle sat alone at her dining table, surrounded by notes and recordings. Her phone chimed with a news alert. A prominent cultural commentator had dubbed her the modern-day Rosa Parks of the skies in a viral essay. In Oakland, a street artist had painted a 3-story mural of her face with the words, "Fly above it," emblazoned below. The personal attack pieces were being drowned out by a growing chorus of support. Justice for Danielle trended alongside "Daw boycott Sky Air." But Danielle knew the fight was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. She walked to her bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was tired but resolute. Danielle opened a drawer and pulled out a sheet of her mother's stationery, preserved from Maya's personal effects after her passing. Sitting at her vanity, she began to write. "Dear Mama, today, I felt your presence more strongly than ever. The battle I'm fighting isn't just mine. It's yours. It's ours. It's everyone who ever had to prove they belonged in spaces built to exclude them. They tried to make me small, just as you warned they might. Instead, I'm growing larger, becoming more than just a CEO, more than just a single passenger who was wronged. I'm becoming a symbol, and that terrifies me because symbols can't afford to falter. But I hear your voice reminding me, it's not just about you, baby girl. It never was. I promise you this. I will finish what we started. I will build that bus you talked about. And everyone will have a seat. Love always. Your Danielle." She folded the letter, kissed it gently, and whispered to the empty room. "It's not just about me anymore. It never was." The morning rain tapped against the windows of the private meeting room in a nondescript Brooklyn hotel. Danielle Vaughn sat perfectly still, her posture relaxed but alert as the door opened. Imani Thompson escorted Rachel Monroe inside, then positioned herself by the door, close enough to intervene if necessary, distant enough to give them space. Rachel looked different from the confident flight attendant who had pushed Danielle off the plane. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her eyes ringed with the unmistakable shadows of sleepless nights. She clutched her purse with white knuckles. "Thank you for meeting with me," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. Danielle gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit." Rachel lowered herself into the chair and placed a manila envelope on the table between them. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. "I didn't expect you to be so," Rachel finally began. "Normal," Danielle offered. "Calm," Rachel corrected. "After what I did to you, I expected, I don't know, anger, hostility. Would that make this easier for you?" Danielle asked evenly. "If I shouted and accused, would that fit your narrative better?" Rachel's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "No, nothing about this is easy." She pushed the envelope toward Danielle. "These are Sky Air training materials, not the public versions, the real ones. The ones they give attendants after the official training is over." Danielle opened the envelope and began reviewing its contents. Inside were printed slides, handwritten notes, and a flash drive. One document titled Passenger Management Strategies contained highlighted sections on identifying potentially disruptive customers with specific behavioral indicators that correlated strongly with racial and ethnic stereotypes. "This is explicitly designed to target minorities," Danielle observed. "We were told it was about security and customer satisfaction," Rachel said, wiping at her eyes. "They never used racial terms, just profiles and indicators. But we all knew what it meant. And over time," her voice broke. "Over time, I started seeing what they wanted me to see, making the assumptions they trained me to make." Danielle continued examining the documents, her expression unchanged. "How long has this been going on?" "The current program is 3 years old, but the attitude, the culture, it's always been there, just less documented." Rachel paused, then added, "There's more, chat logs, emails, recordings of planning meetings. I started collecting everything after your incident." "Why?" Danielle asked, looking directly at Rachel for the first time. Rachel's gaze dropped to her hands. "My daughter. She asked me if I was mean to black women." A fresh tear escaped down her cheek. I couldn't lie to her face. And once I admitted it to her, I couldn't deny it to myself anymore. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. What do you want, Rachel? Danielle finally asked. I don't expect forgiveness, Rachel said quickly. I don't deserve that. And I'm not looking for immunity or a deal. Then what? Rachel straightened her shoulders and met Danielle's gaze. I want my daughter to see that when you realize you're wrong, really wrong, not just made a mistake, you do something about it, no matter the cost. Danielle studied the flight attendant carefully. They'll destroy you for this. You understand that? Rachel nodded slowly. They're already trying, but they don't control the narrative anymore. You do. After another long moment, Danielle reached across the table, not to shake hands, but to close the manila envelope and slide it back toward Rachel. Confusion flickered across Rachel's face. I don't want copies, Danielle said calmly. I want you to go public with the originals, not for my vindication, but because the truth matters more coming from the inside. Go public? Rachel's voice trembled. Sky Air will fire me. My union will abandon me. I'll never work in the industry again. Probably, Danielle agreed. Is your daughter's respect worth that price? 2 days later, Rachel Monroe sat opposite Diane Foster, anchor of the nation's highest-rated primetime news program. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, but her voice was steady as the red recording light came on. Tonight, an exclusive, Diane began. The flight attendant at the center of the Sky Air discrimination scandal breaks her silence. Rachel Monroe, why are you speaking out now? Rachel took a deep breath. Because I was wrong, and the company that trained me is worse. We were told to treat certain passengers differently, not explicitly because of race, but using coded language and profiles that clearly targeted people of color. The interview continued for 20 tense minutes, as Rachel methodically described Sky Air's training practices, internal communications, and the systemic biases built into everything from seat assignments to service protocols. She provided documents, recordings, and first-hand accounts that corroborated every claim. When asked about her confrontation with Danielle, Rachel didn't flinch. I physically pushed a customer because she didn't fit my idea of who belongs in first class. I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry for that. But I'd be lying if I said it was just me. The entire system is designed to make employees like me into the front lines of discrimination. As the interview aired, Sky Air CEO Gerald Langston stood in his wood-paneled office watching the broadcast with a stony expression. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his tailored suit immaculate, his jaw clenched. When the segment ended, he switched off the television and turned to his crisis management team. Release the apology statement, he ordered, his voice emotionless. The standard one about diversity commitments and internal reviews. Brian Wells, the head of legal, cleared his throat. Sir, with these new allegations, I think we need to be more specific. Just do it, Gerald snapped. And get me Senator Spence on the phone. It's time to bring in our political capital. After the team left, Gerald picked up a secure phone and called Andrew Thompson, Sky Air's head of strategic operations. The Monroe situation has escalated, he said without preamble. Initiate the PR strike back immediately. I want everything we have on Vaughn, business, personal, financial, leaked to the right outlets by morning. She needs to be damaged beyond repair before this goes any further. Meanwhile, across town, Danielle reviewed Rachel's interview with her team. Imani switched off the television as the segment ended. She did well, Rennell Washington observed. Authentic, direct, no signs of coaching. Danielle nodded in agreement. This changes the narrative from one incident to systematic behavior. The public response will be... Her phone rang, interrupting her assessment. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a local area code. Danielle Vaughn, she answered. Ms. Vaughn, my name is Roberta Kane, came a gravelly female voice. Captain Roberta Kane. I've been a pilot with Sky Air for 27 years. Danielle put the call on speaker. What can I do for you, Captain Kane? It's what I can do for you, the woman replied. I'm a Vietnam vet, Ms. Vaughn. Flew helicopter medevacs when they still said women couldn't handle combat zones. I've seen what happens to folks who speak up against the system, but I've got 3 years till retirement and not much left to lose. I'm listening, Danielle said carefully. What Rachel Monroe said tonight is just the passenger-facing part of the problem. The safety issues go deeper, much deeper. Captain Kane's voice lowered. I've got flight safety data that's been falsified, maintenance records that don't match actual work performed, and fuel quality reports that would make your hair stand on end. Danielle exchanged glances with her team. Can you verify these claims? Better. Than that, Captain Kane replied. I can give you access to the entire internal system. You just need someone who knows where to look. Someone like Jude, Imani whispered. Danielle nodded. Captain Kane, would you be willing to work with our technical team? Completely confidential, of course. That's why I called Ms. Vaughn. It's time someone had the guts to clean house. Count me in. 3 days later, Danielle hosted a live-streamed panel discussion from Nova's headquarters. The panel included Rachel Monroe, Captain Kane, representatives from airline unions, 3 Black, female entrepreneurs, and prominent legal scholars. The discussion focused not just on Sky Air, but on discriminatory practices throughout the transportation industry. As viewership climbed past 10 million, Danielle outlined her vision. A new airline built on principles of transparency, equity, and genuine customer service. We're calling it New Altitude, she announced. Not just because we aim higher, but because we're changing the altitude of an entire industry. An airline where your experience isn't determined by how you look, where safety isn't compromised for profit, and where employees are valued for their integrity rather than their compliance. Social media exploded with the hashtag #NewAltitude, while Sky Air's stock continued its downward spiral. By market close, share prices had dropped 24% from their pre-scandal value. In his Queens workshop, Jude worked feverishly with the access provided by Captain Kane. His screens displayed complex data matrices and code sequences as he navigated Sky Air's internal systems. Holy hell, he muttered, staring at a discovery on his center monitor. He immediately called Danielle. You need to see this, he said when she answered. They have an AI system, they call it Vulture, that automatically flags and reassigns seats without human review. What kind of flags? Danielle asked. Primarily? Names. Specifically, names that sound ethnic, their word, not mine. The system automatically downgrades certain passengers or reassigns them away from premium cabins, then generates false reason codes to cover the changes. That's why I was randomly selected for additional screening so often, Danielle realized. The algorithm was flagging me. Exactly, Jude confirmed. And here's the kicker. They've been denying this system exists for years. There were congressional inquiries about algorithmic discrimination 2 years ago, and Sky Air executives testified under oath that no such system was in use. Perjury, Danielle said softly. That's a game changer. At his private club across town, Gerald Langston sat in a wood-paneled room with Senator Donald Spence, a powerful figure on the Transportation Committee. Both men sipped expensive scotch as they spoke in hushed tones. Donald, we've been friends for 20 years. Gerald said earnestly. Sky Air has supported your campaigns consistently. Now I need your help to put the brakes on these hearings before they destroy the entire industry. Senator Spence swirled his drink thoughtfully. The optics are challenging, Gerald. The public is captivated by this Vaughn woman. Public opinion is fickle, Gerald dismissed. What about the FAA review we discussed? Can you delay it? For the right consideration, perhaps, the senator replied carefully. The committee does have significant discretion on timing. $2 million in campaign support, Gerald offered. Through the proper channels, of course. Neither man noticed. The young woman clearing their empty plates. Melissa Carter, a staffer for Congresswoman Gutierrez who worked part-time at the club. Her phone, tucked in her apron pocket, recorded every word of their conversation. The next morning, a major financial news site published a bombshell exposé claiming Danielle's wealth came from offshore accounts linked to her ex-husband's fraud schemes. The story alleged that Nova's meteoric rise was fueled by laundered money and questionable connections. Within hours, Danielle responded by releasing her complete tax records for the past decade, documentation of every major investment in Nova, and a comprehensive history of her philanthropic work, including mentorship programs for women and minorities in tech that had launched dozens of successful careers. The attempted smear backfired spectacularly, humanizing Danielle and showcasing her commitment to ethical business practices. The original story was retracted with an apology by afternoon. Later that evening, Danielle called an emergency meeting with Malik Ayers and her core team. "It's time for our boldest move," she announced. "We're going to acquire Sky Air's parent company's logistics technology division." "That's their crown jewel," Malik observed. "They'll never sell it voluntarily." "They won't have a choice," Danielle replied. "With their stock in freefall and federal investigations looming, the board will be looking for liquidity and distance from the scandal. Using our combined resources," she continued, "we can make an offer that's too good to refuse, and then implement the changes the industry has resisted for decades." "You don't want to destroy them," Ronell realized. "You want to transform them from within," Danielle smiled. "We don't need to destroy the system. We can replace it, one piece at a time." The marble corridors of the Senate office building echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations as spectators filed into the hearing room. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically, capturing the scene as members of the Senate Transportation Committee took their seats on the raised dais. Congresswoman Lena Gutierrez had successfully pushed for these hearings, building a coalition that crossed party lines after the evidence of discrimination became too substantial to ignore. Now she sat in the front row of the gallery, watching as the witnesses were sworn in. Danielle Vaughn raised her right hand along with Rachel Monroe, Captain Kane, and Jude Wilson. After swearing to tell the truth, they took their seats at the witness table, facing the senators who would question them. Senator Martha Williams, the committee chair, opened the proceedings with a solemn statement. "These hearings are not about one incident or one company, but about ensuring that our nation's transportation systems serve all Americans with fairness and dignity. The evidence presented to this committee suggests patterns of discrimination that demand our attention and action." For the next 4 hours, the witnesses presented their testimony. Danielle spoke of her experience with measured precision, contextualizing it within broader patterns rather than focusing on personal grievance. Rachel detailed the training procedures and corporate culture that normalized discrimination. Captain Kane revealed the falsified safety records that put profit above passenger welfare. Jude explained the vulture algorithm's discriminatory design with technical clarity that even the most technology-averse senators could understand. During a particularly pointed exchange, Senator Williams asked Danielle, "Ms. Vaughn, in your estimation, how widespread are these practices within the airline industry?" "Based on our research and the testimony of industry employees," Danielle replied, "these issues exist to varying degrees across most major carriers. However, Sky Air's case is particularly egregious due to the systematic nature of their approach and the explicit documentation we've uncovered." As the hearing continued, Imani moved quietly through the chamber, distributing a presentation packet to committee members. The materials included a comprehensive slide deck detailing Sky Air's profit strategies, specifically how the airline used discriminatory profiling to maximize revenue by selectively enforcing rules, denying refunds to certain demographic groups, and allocating inferior services to passengers deemed less valuable. Senator William Bennett, usually a staunch defender of corporate interests, held up one particular page during his questioning. "Mr. Wilson," he addressed Jude, "this document shows that Sky Air's internal code designated certain zip codes as low priority for customer service responses and refund processing. Is that correct?" "Yes, Senator," Jude confirmed. "And those zip codes correspond almost exclusively to predominantly Black and Hispanic neighborhoods across all major markets." Senator Bennett's face reddened. "This isn't just bad business. This is a modern-day Jim Crow in the sky." The phrase "Jim Crow in the sky" exploded across news chyrons and social media within minutes. By the end of the day's testimony, the hashtag was trending globally. In his office, Gerald Langston watched the hearings with growing dread. When his executive team gathered for emergency consultation, their usual confidence had evaporated. "The Vulture program is our biggest vulnerability," Brian Wells, the legal counsel, stated bluntly. "We denied its existence under oath. That's perjury. The board is requesting your resignation," added Heather Mills, the head of HR. They're meeting now to discuss separation terms. Gerald stared at them coldly. After 20 years, they expect me to be the sacrificial lamb? It's you or the entire company, Heather replied, and frankly, it might be both. 3 hours later, Sky Air issued a terse press release. Gerald Langston has resigned as CEO, effective immediately. The board has appointed Chief Operating Officer Thomas Reed as interim CEO, while the company addresses recent concerns and cooperates fully with ongoing investigations. What the press release didn't mention was that Gerald's executive assistant, Linda Parker, had been instructed to clean out certain sensitive files. As she fed documents into the shredder late that night, she was unaware that security cameras, accessing protocols Jude had quietly adjusted, recorded her every move. The footage was automatically forwarded to Congresswoman Gutierrez's office and the Justice Department. By morning, Linda had been subpoenaed, along with every document and device in Gerald's office. As public pressure mounted against Sky Air, Danielle faced challenges of her own. Driving home from a late meeting about New Altitude's launch plans, she noticed a black SUV following her car. The vehicle maintained a consistent distance through several turns, its high beams occasionally flashing in her rearview mirror. When she arrived at her building, the SUV drove past slowly, its tinted windows concealing the occupants. Minutes later, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off or you'll be next." Danielle forwarded the message to Ronell and Malik, then requested a meeting with her building security team. By morning, she had hired a personal security detail, not out of fear but pragmatism. The fight had become too important to be derailed by intimidation tactics. 2 weeks after the Senate hearings began, Danielle received the news she'd been waiting for. The Federal Aviation Administration had approved New Altitude's application for commercial airline certification. The approval came after an expedited but thorough review, sparked in part by the revelations about Sky Air's falsified safety records. New Altitude's business plan was revolutionary: 100% carbon-neutral operations, transparent pricing without hidden fees, and an AI-driven fairness algorithm that Jude had designed specifically to counteract the biases of traditional airline systems. The company's slogan, "Fly above the bias," spoke directly to its mission. Danielle announced the approval at a press conference held in the same terminal where she'd been pushed off Sky Air's flight months earlier. "Today marks the beginning of a new era in air travel," she stated, surrounded by her team and early investors, including Malik Ayers. New Altitude isn't just another airline. It's a promise to travelers that dignity isn't a premium service, but a fundamental right. As news of New Altitude's approval spread, something unexpected happened at Sky Air. Employees began resigning. Not just a few disgruntled workers, but hundreds, from baggage handlers to senior executives. Many cited ethical concerns in their resignation letters, and many expressly asked to join New Altitude. Even more surprising was Rachel Monroe's new role. After completing a specialized training program, she had been certified as a diversity, equity, and inclusion instructor and hired by New Altitude to help develop their staff training protocols. "We don't ignore mistakes, we learn from them," Danielle explained when questioned about the controversial hire. Rachel's perspective is valuable precisely because she's seen both sides of this issue. Sky Air's interim leadership, desperate to stem the bleeding, attempted one final gambit. The company filed a lawsuit against Danielle and Nova Technologies, alleging corporate espionage, theft of proprietary information, and interference with business relationships. The lawsuit claimed that Danielle had used her prior relationship with Sky Air as a passenger and potential vendor to gather confidential information, which she then used to damage the company and launch a competitor. The legal maneuver might have worked in the past, but Malik Ayers had anticipated this response. His legal team had meticulously documented every step of their investigation, ensuring all information was obtained through whistleblowers, public records, or legal data analysis. At the preliminary hearing, Malik's attorneys presented this documentation to the judge, who took less than an hour to dismiss the case. Sky Air was further ordered to pay $68 million in legal costs and damages, for filing a frivolous lawsuit intended to stifle whistleblowers. It was the final blow to the struggling airline. Within days, major credit agencies downgraded Sky Air's bonds to junk status, and stockholders began a mass sell-off. As Sky Air imploded, Danielle requested a meeting with Elliot Hart, the board member and former mentor who had betrayed her by feeding information to Sky Air. They met in a quiet corner of the Harvard Club, where they had once celebrated her graduation together. Elliot looked older than his 65 years, his usual confidence replaced by a hangdog expression as he slid into the seat across from Danielle. "Thank you for meeting me," he began. "I know I don't deserve—" "This isn't about what you deserve," Danielle interrupted calmly. "This is about closure." Elliot nodded, his eyes on the tablecloth. "I made a terrible mistake. When Sky Air threatened to pull their pension fund from my management, I panicked. $15 billion in assets. I convinced myself it was just business." "It's never just business when it impacts people's dignity," Danielle replied. "That's what you taught me, remember? In your ethics seminar my second year at Harvard." Elliot winced at the reminder. "I want to make amends. Tell me how." Danielle studied him for a long moment. "There's nothing to be done, Elliot. You didn't just lose a mentee. You lost your legacy, everything you built, every student you inspired. We're all questioning now whether you ever meant any of it." She stood, gathering her belongings. "That's a consequence no apology can erase." As Danielle walked away, Elliot remained seated, alone with the weight of his choices. The final pieces fell into place when 3 major airline unions, representing pilots, flight attendants, and ground crews, announced their support for New Altitude. The unions cited the company's ethical practices, employee-centered policies, and commitment to diversity as key factors in their decision. With union support came the experienced workforce needed for national operations. Danielle insisted on diverse hiring practices, including blind application reviews and educational reinvestment programs for communities historically excluded from aviation careers. 6 months after Rachel Monroe had pushed Danielle Vaughn off a Sky Air flight, the consequences had escalated beyond anything anyone could have predicted. Following the Senate hearings, damning evidence leaks, and consecutive quarterly losses, Sky Air announced it was ceasing operations. The FAA cited systemic ethical violations and safety concerns in its decision to revoke the airline's operating certificate. The company that had once been a titan of the industry was now selling off its assets to cover mounting debts and legal settlements. The gate where Danielle had been humiliated now stood empty, its Sky Air signage removed, its future uncertain, until New Altitude announced it would be the location of their inaugural flight service. In his Miami penthouse, Gerald Langston watched the news of Sky Air's collapse with a tumbler of scotch in hand. His phone, once constantly buzzing with calls from industry leaders and politicians, had been silent for days. The perjury investigation was advancing, and his former allies had abandoned him one by one. As he stared at the screen showing Danielle Vaughn announcing New Altitude's expansion plans, he raised his glass in a bitter toast. "Well played," he muttered to the empty room. In the final days before New Altitude's launch, Danielle stood at the window of her new corporate headquarters, a sustainable building powered entirely by renewable energy. The view included the airport, where everything had started, now transformed by her vision. "Are you ready?" Imani asked, joining her at the window. "For the launch?" "Absolutely," Danielle replied. "No," Imani clarified. "For what comes after. You've changed an industry, Danielle. People will expect you to keep leading the charge for other changes." Danielle smiled. "That was always the plan, Imani. This was never just about airlines." "What was it about then?" Imani asked. Danielle turned from the window to face her friend. "My mother told me once that I'd build my own bus someday. She was thinking too small." She gestured toward the airport. "It was about building wings for everyone who was ever told they couldn't fly." The morning sun cast a golden glow over Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport as crowds gathered at Terminal E. What had once been Sky Air's main hub was now adorned with the sleek teal and silver branding of New Altitude, A sense of anticipation filled the air as passengers, media, and aviation industry representatives assembled for a historic moment. New Altitude's inaugural flight from Atlanta to San Francisco. Danielle Vaughn stood at the boarding gate, dressed in a tailored suit that matched the airline's signature teal. Her hair was styled in elegant twists, and though her expression remained composed, her eyes sparkled with quiet triumph. This moment represented more than just the launch of a new business venture. It was the physical manifestation of a promise, made to herself and to every person who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong. The gate area had been transformed for the occasion. Gone were the sterile, impersonal fixtures of traditional airports. Instead, the space featured sustainable materials, artwork from local artists of color, and interactive screens displaying the airline's commitment to transparency and equity. Every detail reflected Danielle's vision of what air travel could and should be. As boarding time approached, Danielle stepped to the microphone. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Today marks not just the first flight of New Altitude, but a new chapter in aviation history. This journey began with a push." She paused, allowing the significance to resonate with the audience. "But what was meant to diminish me instead gave birth to something greater than any of us could have imagined." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Many had followed Danielle's story from the viral video to the Senate hearings and beyond. They weren't just customers, they were witnesses to a transformation. "Today, we don't just board an airplane," Danielle continued. "We rise above outdated systems and biased practices. We prove that equity and excellence aren't mutually exclusive, they're interdependent." As she concluded her remarks, the boarding process began. Unlike traditional airlines with their hierarchy of zones and statuses, New Altitude had pioneered a new system based on practical needs. Families with small children, passengers with mobility challenges, and those needing extra time boarded first, regardless of ticket class. Danielle stood at the gate, personally, welcoming each passenger. People from all walks of life, executives in business attire, families in casual clothes, elderly couples, young students, all received the same warm greeting. Many stopped to shake her hand or take selfies. Some shared their own stories of discrimination faced while traveling. A young black girl, about 7 years old, approached Danielle shyly, clutching her mother's hand. "Are you really the lady who owns the whole airplane?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the terminal's bustle. Danielle knelt to meet the child at eye level. "I am. My name is Danielle." "I'm Zoe," the girl replied. "Mommy showed me your picture in her magazine. She said you're changing things." "I'm trying to," Danielle said with a gentle smile. "But do you know what's even more important than changing things?" Zoe shook her head, eyes wide, "making sure the next generation, that's you, knows they can change things too." The girl's face lit up, and her mother mouthed a silent thank you as they continued toward the jet bridge. When all passengers had boarded, Danielle walked down the jet bridge herself, pausing briefly at the aircraft door. Captain Roberta Kane stood in the cockpit doorway, her gray hair contrasting with her crisp new uniform, her Vietnam veteran pin prominently displayed on her lapel. "Ready to make history, Miss Vaughn?" the captain asked with a grin. "More than ready, Captain Kane," Danielle replied. "Let's show them how it's done." The flight itself was remarkable in its unremarkability, smooth, comfortable, and free from the tension that often permeated air travel. Flight attendants, including several former Sky Air employees who had joined New Altitude, moved through the cabin with genuine warmth. The in-flight entertainment system featured an unprecedented selection of content from diverse filmmakers and artists. Even the food, sourced from minority-owned businesses along the flight route, represented a departure from standard airline fare. When the aircraft touched down in San Francisco, passengers erupted in spontaneous applause. As they disembarked, many expressed that it had been the most pleasant flying experience of their lives, not because of luxury amenities, but because of the palpable sense of respect that infused every aspect of the journey. Back in her San Francisco hotel suite that evening, Danielle reviewed the day's coverage on her tablet. Every major news outlet had covered the inaugural flight, with headlines ranging from "New Altitude Sets New Standard" to the airline built on justice takes flight. Social media buzzed with positive reviews from passengers. As she scrolled through her emails, one particular message caught her attention. The sender was unfamiliar, but the subject line read, "Letter from Zoe Baker, age 7. Danielle opened it, to find a scanned handwritten note on rainbow-colored paper. "Dear Ms. Danielle, thank you for letting me and Mommy fly on your airplane.
Mommy helped me write this letter. I want to fly high like you someday. You showed me I can. I drew a picture of you. You are a superhero who makes airplanes fair for everybody." Love, Zoe. Attached was a crayon drawing of a stick figure with brown
Skin wearing a cape, standing atop an airplane with smiling faces looking out the windows. For the first time since the ordeal began, Danielle broke down in tears. They weren't tears of residual hurt or even relief, but of overwhelming recognition that her fight had already begun to shape the next generation's sense of possibility. She sat on the edge of her bed, tablet clutched to her chest, allowing herself this private moment of vulnerability before wiping her eyes and typing a heartfelt reply to Zoe and her mother. 2 weeks after the inaugural flight, New Altitude held its first comprehensive training session for new employees. The airline had received over 20,000 applications for just 500 positions, with many coming from aviation professionals eager to be part of the industry's transformation. In a modern training facility at the Atlanta headquarters, Rachel Monroe stood before a diverse group of flight attendant trainees. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the teal blazer of New Altitude's training staff. Though her hands fidgeted slightly with her tablet, her voice was steady as she addressed the group. "My name is Rachel Monroe, and I'm the last person who should be standing here today," she began candidly. 8 months ago, I physically pushed a black woman off a flight because she didn't fit my preconception of who belonged in first class. That woman was Danielle Vaughn. A murmur rippled through the trainees. Though everyone knew Rachel's story, it had been covered extensively in the media. Hearing her acknowledge it directly was powerful. "I'm not here to seek redemption or to be congratulated for doing the bare minimum of recognizing my mistakes," Rachel continued. "I'm here because the biases that influenced my actions that day weren't just personal failings. They were the product of systemic problems that permeate our industry. By understanding how these biases are cultivated and reinforced, we can actively work to dismantle them." For the next hour, Rachel led a nuanced discussion about unconscious bias, using her own experience as a case study. She didn't shy away from difficult questions or attempt to minimize her actions. Instead, she created a space where prospective flight attendants could honestly examine the subtle ways discrimination manifested in customer service environments. After the session, a young black woman approached Rachel. "I wasn't sure how I'd feel about learning from you," she admitted. "But hearing you own your mistakes without excuses, it's the reason I applied to New Altitude. This is the only airline that seems serious about addressing these issues head-on." Rachel nodded, understanding the mixed feelings her presence might evoke. "What's your name?" "Jasmine Taylor." "Well, Jasmine, I hope I can earn your trust over time. Not through words, but through consistent actions." Jasmine considered this, then offered a small smile. "That's a good start." Across town, in a renovated warehouse space filled with computer equipment, Jude Wilson was embarking on his own new chapter. Danielle had appointed him as head of New Altitude's Ethics and Technology Division, giving him complete authority over the development and implementation of the airline's AI systems. Today, he was hosting an open house for his new team, a diverse group of programmers, data scientists, and ethics specialists tasked with ensuring that technology served all customers fairly. "Welcome to the Anti-Vulture Unit," Jude announced to the assembled group, referencing SkyAir's discriminatory algorithm. His wild red hair was somewhat tamer than usual, though his enthusiasm remained undiminished. "Our job is to make sure technology amplifies human dignity rather than undermining it." He gestured to the massive screens displaying complex code behind him. "Every algorithm we build undergoes rigorous testing for bias. Every dataset we use is examined for hidden prejudices. And most importantly, every decision our systems make is transparent and explainable. A young programmer raised her hand. But isn't complete algorithmic fairness technically impossible? Even with the best intentions, some bias always creeps, and Jude grinned. Exactly right. That's why we don't claim perfection. We commit to vigilance. We actively look for bias, invite criticism, and build systems that get better through constant ethical refinement. As the team discussion continued, Jude caught sight of Danielle watching from the doorway. She gave him an approving nod before slipping away. Later, during a private moment in his office, Jude looked at the framed letter on his wall, his official pardon and record expungement, made possible by Danielle's advocacy. She saw me as more than my mistakes, he told his assistant. That's what justice looks like. Not ignoring the past, but refusing to let it dictate the future. In Washington, D.C., Congresswoman Lena Gutierrez announced an initiative inspired by the Sky Air case. The Transportation Equity Act, comprehensive legislation, aimed at addressing discrimination across all forms of public transportation. Standing on the Capitol steps, surrounded by civil rights leaders and transportation industry reformers, she credited Danielle's courage for bringing these issues to national attention. What began as one woman's stand against injustice has catalyzed a movement for accountability and fairness across our entire transportation system, Gutierrez declared. The Transportation Equity Act will establish new standards for employee training, algorithmic transparency, and corporate governance in every mode of public transit. Watching the announcement from her office, Danielle smiled. The ripple effects continued to spread, touching areas of public life she hadn't initially targeted. This was how real change happened, not through single dramatic gestures, but through persistent pressure applied at critical points throughout interconnected systems. That afternoon, Danielle unveiled another initiative, the Altitude Access Program, a revolutionary approach to corporate social responsibility. The program would provide free flights and career mentorship to underserved youth of color interested in aviation and technology careers. Every new altitude ticket purchased contributes to this program, Danielle explained at the press conference. We're not just offering occasional charity flights, we're building a sustainable pipeline of opportunity that will diversify our industry for generations to come. When asked by a reporter if the program was a form of reparations, Danielle didn't shy away from the term. It's an acknowledgement that access has been systematically denied to certain communities, she replied. And yes, that requires systematic remedy. Call it reparations if you wish. I call it investing in talent that our industry has foolishly overlooked. As summer turned to fall, the transformation of the aviation landscape continued. The old Sky Air terminal at JFK, once a symbol of discrimination for Danielle, was repurposed as the Flight Equity Learning Center, a state-of-the-art facility where future aviation professionals of color receive training, mentorship, and job placement assistance. On the center's opening day, Danielle toured the facility with a group of high school students from underserved communities in New York City. As they explored simulation labs and classroom spaces, she noticed their initial hesitation giving way to excitement. Before today, I never even considered working in aviation, admitted 17-year-old Marcus Johnson. I didn't see people who looked like me in those roles. That's exactly why this center exists, Danielle replied. Sometimes, you need to see the possibility before you can pursue it. In a surprise move that made headlines across the country, Danielle promoted Imani Thompson to Chief Operating Officer of New Altitude. The announcement came during a company-wide dinner celebrating the airline's successful first quarter. Imani has been my right hand through every challenge, Danielle told the assembled staff. Her brilliance, loyalty, and moral compass have been instrumental in building New Altitude. This promotion isn't just deserved, it's overdue. The staff rose in a standing ovation as Imani, momentarily speechless, embraced Danielle before addressing her colleagues. When I joined Danielle at Nova years ago, I knew I was working for a visionary, Imani said. What I didn't know was that I was joining a movement that would transform an entire industry. I accept this role with humility and determination to continue the work we've started. As New Altitude continued to thrive, media attention on Danielle intensified. Magazine covers labeled her the Maverick of the Skies, Streaming services pitched documentary deals, and book publishers offered lucrative contracts for her memoir. Danielle accepted the magazine features, but turned down most entertainment industry offers, explaining to her publicist, "This isn't a movie, this is a movement, and movements need sustainable attention, not momentary spotlights." Instead, she channeled her influence into practical reforms, meeting with airline industry leaders who were suddenly eager to adopt New Altitude's equity practices, now that they had proven financially successful. On the anniversary of her mother's death, Danielle took a private day away from her public responsibilities. She flew to Atlanta, rented a car, and drove to the small cemetery where Maya Vaughn was buried. The autumn leaves crunched beneath her feet as she walked to the simple headstone marked with her mother's name and the words, "Teacher, Advocate, Mother." Danielle knelt by the grave, placing fresh flowers beside the stone. From her purse, she took her boarding pass from New Altitude Flight 401, the inaugural journey, and placed it gently atop the headstone. "You were right, Mama," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I built my own wings, and they're carrying so many others now, too." She remained there as the afternoon sun began its descent, sharing quiet words with the woman who had first taught her about dignity and determination. By the time she rose to leave, her resolve had deepened. The journey wasn't complete, it had only just begun. 5 years later, the international terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport buzzed with activity as a school group of 30 middle schoolers gathered excitedly for their field trip. The children, from a formerly underserved Atlanta school district, wore matching T-shirts with the words, "Future Aviators," emblazoned across the front. "Remember, everyone," their teacher called out, "we're not just visiting an airport today. We're visiting a piece of history. New Altitude changed the way airlines operate around the world." A girl at the back of the group raised her hand. "Ms. Washington, will we get to see Ms. Vaughn today?" "I don't think so, Destiny," the teacher replied. "Ms. Vaughn is very busy these days, but this whole place reflects her vision." As the group moved through security, a remarkably smooth process thanks to New Altitude's redesigned protocols, they didn't notice the woman observing them from a nearby coffee shop. Danielle Vaughn, now 40, watched the children with a quiet smile. Her hair showed a few strands of silver now, and fine lines had appeared at the corners of her eyes, evidence of both the challenges and triumphs of the past 5 years. New Altitude had grown from a single domestic route to a global airline leader in equity, technology, and sustainability. What had begun as a response to discrimination had evolved into a movement that transformed industry standards worldwide. Other airlines had been forced to adapt or lose market share to the new paradigm Danielle had established. More importantly, New Altitude had become a symbol. Children took field trips just to visit their terminals, not merely to see airplanes, but to witness what was possible when exclusion was replaced with opportunity. Danielle finished her coffee and headed to her gate. Today wasn't about airline business. She was flying to Boston to teach the first session of her new course at Harvard Business School, Ethics in Business Power. The prestigious institution had invited her to develop a curriculum based on her experiences transforming the airline industry. Her phone chimed with a text from her assistant. "Your class is already oversubscribed. 200+ students trying to get in." Danielle smiled. The next generation of business leaders was hungry for a new approach, one that valued human dignity alongside profit margins. As she boarded her flight, several passengers recognized her, but the flight attendants maintained her privacy with practiced professionalism. In Chicago that same day, Rachel Monroe accepted the Aviation Equity Coalition's annual award for her work in reforming airline training practices. The ceremony was small but significant, attended by industry professionals committed to continuing the transformation Rachel had helped catalyze. What made the moment especially meaningful was the person who introduced her, Emma Monroe, now AI, poised 15-year-old who spoke with remarkable confidence about her mother's journey. "My mom taught me that real courage isn't about never making mistakes," Emma told the audience. "It's about facing those mistakes honestly and doing the hard work to make things right." 5 years ago, she made a choice that could have destroyed her life. Instead, it became the foundation for her most important work. Rachel embraced her daughter before taking the podium, visibly moved by the introduction. Though the path hadn't been easy, many had never forgiven her role in the original incident. She had found purpose in the unglamorous work of changing industry practices from the inside out. Transformation isn't a destination, Rachel told the gathered professionals. It's a continuous process of examination, accountability, and improvement. The systems we've built over decades cannot be dismantled overnight, but they can be rebuilt, piece by piece, with intention and persistence. Across the country in Seattle, Jude Wilson stood before a group of formerly incarcerated individuals at the headquarters of Second Chance Tech, the nonprofit he had founded 3 years earlier. The organization trained people with criminal records for careers in ethical technology development. Society will tell you that your past defines your future, Jude told the assembled group, his once wild red hair now cut in a more conservative style that did nothing to tame his enthusiasm. I'm living proof that's a lie. 5 years ago, I was a former convict struggling to find legitimate work. Today, I'm leading innovations in ethical AI that are being adopted worldwide. What he didn't mention, though everyone knew, was that Danielle Vaughn had been Second Chance Tech's first and most generous donor. The program had since expanded to 5 cities, with plans for international growth. Technology can perpetuate bias, or it can help dismantle it, Jude continued. Which outcome we get depends entirely on who builds the systems and what values guide their work. In Atlanta, one of New Altitude's flagship routes departed for Washington, D.C., a flight with special significance. Named the Maya Vaughn Memorial Flight, it operated at no cost once annually for civil rights scholars traveling to a major conference. The program, now in its 3rd year, had become a coveted opportunity for academics and activists working on transportation equity issues. This year's cohort included researchers from across the country, each pursuing projects that built upon Danielle's work in different ways, expanding equity initiatives to buses, trains, ride shares, and other transportation modes that affected daily life for millions. In his Manhattan penthouse, Malik Ayers put the finishing touches on the manuscript for his book, The Investment That Changed the Skies. The autobiography detailed his role in the New Altitude story, but focused primarily on the evolution of his investment philosophy. Danielle Vaughn taught me the difference between power and purpose, he wrote in the final chapter. I had spent decades accumulating the former while neglecting the latter. Our partnership showed me that the greatest returns come not from extracting value, but from creating it, particularly in places where it has been systematically denied. His editor had initially pushed for more sensational details about the takedown of Sky Air, but Malik had insisted on focusing on the constructive aspects of the story. There are enough books about destruction, he argued. This one is about building something better from the ashes. On a perfect spring morning 3 months later, Danielle arrived at New Altitude's private airfield outside Atlanta for a special occasion, her final flight as the airline's active CEO. Though she would remain as chairwoman of the board, day to day, operations would transition to Imani Thompson, completing a succession plan years in the making. For this farewell flight, Danielle would be realizing a personal dream, piloting the plane herself, having completed her commercial pilot's license over the previous year. Captain Roberta Kane, now approaching retirement herself, would serve as her co-pilot for the journey. Never thought I'd see this day, Captain Kane remarked as they completed pre-flight checks in the cockpit. A black woman CEO flying her own damn airline. We've come a long way. With much further to go, Danielle replied with a smile. The flight was a short one, Atlanta to Charleston and back, with a small group of passengers including early New Altitude employees, key allies from the original struggle, and a few lucky contest winners. The symbolism was lost on no one. Danielle Vaughn, once pushed off a plane, was now literally taking control of the flight path. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Danielle engaged the autopilot and took a moment to absorb the reality of her position, sitting in the captain's seat, thousands of feet above the landscape where her mother had once told her she would build her own bus. In first class, a young girl of about 8 sat in seat 1A, watching the cockpit door with fascination. When Danielle emerged briefly to greet passengers, the girl tugged her mother's sleeve excitedly. "Mom," she whispered loudly enough for Danielle to hear. "Is that the lady who changed the world?" Danielle caught the girl's eye and gave her a conspiratorial wink before returning to the cockpit. The innocent question lingered in her mind as she guided the aircraft home. In the years following that final flight, New Altitude continued its expansion, establishing routes connecting major cities across Africa, Asia, and South America. What had begun as an American airline had evolved into a global transportation network committed to connecting underserved markets and communities. The Altitude Bridge Fund, established by Danielle with a portion of her personal wealth, provided capital and mentorship to Black innovators across continents, with a special focus on transportation and environmental technologies. The fund's motto, "Building runways where others see roadblocks," reflected its mission of creating infrastructure for success in overlooked communities. On the 10th anniversary of the incident that had catalyzed everything, Danielle stood at the window of her office in New Altitude's global headquarters. The view included both the airport where she'd been pushed aside and the sprawling campus where thousands now worked to advance her vision of equitable transportation. The company she'd built had transported over 50 million passengers. The policies she'd pioneered had been adopted by competitors worldwide. The young people she'd mentored were emerging as leaders in their own right, and the woman who had once pushed her off a plane had become an unlikely but effective advocate for industry reform. As Danielle watched the New Altitude aircraft taking off and landing, their distinctive teal tails gleaming in the sunlight, a sense of profound completion washed over her. The journey had never been about revenge, or even vindication. It had been about transformation, not just of an industry, but of possibilities. In the distance, a plane climbed steadily into the brilliant blue sky, its ascent a perfect metaphor for the story that had unfolded over the past decade. It had started with a push, but she had turned it into a takeoff. And from that moment on, the sky was never the limit again. What would you do if someone pushed you out of where you belong? Would you walk away, or would you build something better than what tried to exclude you? If this story of resilience and transformation inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share for more powerful narratives that challenge us to rise above. Your support helps these important stories reach those who need to hear them.